Hello, Holy Apostles. Father Jim Barron here. Thanks for joining me with this Fireside. In the month of January, the country focuses on human trafficking awareness. And this is a very important reality for us as Catholics, that we recognize that human trafficking is very much alive and well. It would be nice to think that slavery is a thing of the past, but there are more people in circulation in human trafficking and slavery today than any time in history. And we take this very seriously. There are some wonderful organizations within the church, even locally, like the Bennett Hill Sisters, who do a lot to draw not only awareness to this, but actually take steps to try to help women out of that lifestyle. I can't even call it a lifestyle, out of that bondage, out of that slavery, and reintegrate into a life that so many of us otherwise enjoy. A lot of fundraising is offered in different ways to help support organizations that really do some great work to focus in this area. I encourage you to look at our website, our Facebook page, and our bulletin for some additional resources that you can see from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, other Catholic and other Christian organizations that really, again, do draw attention to this. This reality of human trafficking is something that is very present, especially in America. We are in Colorado, right along the I-25 corridor, which is one of the great veins or the arteries for trafficking. And it has to do with, sometimes tied up with illegal immigration, sometimes kidnapping, a number of different sources to this. But regardless of the sources, we also have to be aware of the demand for which they're supplying. And that's something that we all can do something about. You don't have to be sort of a malicious mafia boss to traffic in humans. Sometimes there are little things that we can do to help to kind of lessen the demand for human trafficking, especially slave labor. And that's through some of our consumer choices that we make. Sometimes we have to reevaluate how we purchase things, whether it's food, clothing, some of our automobiles, our gadgets. A lot of these things come so cheaply, monetarily wise, but they are very expensive in the human cost. And to really do some research, what are the organizations that are putting forward the consumer goods that I'm purchasing, to start to consider my purchases in some ways as almost a moral act, because they do create a certain demand for goods that aren't made in ethical ways. And I'm not just talking about environmental ways, but human ways. That's the most important ethical consideration. And so, again, our consumer goods, primary or foremost of these tends to be clothing. A lot of sweatshops, whether it's in the country or outside of the country, they utilize trafficked human beings and work in conditions that are very abysmal. Now, some cynic economists would say, well, they're making money, aren't they? Well, slaveholders in plantation era America still had to feed and house their slaves. That didn't make it right. And so really, how do we use our consuming or our purchase power to try to support companies that are really intent on being ethical with paying a good wage, ensuring good factory conditions for their workers, making sure that they are treated like human beings. That is important to us. Sometimes you hear this issue brought up and it gets sort of polarized along political lines. But like I speak about in our Stewardship of God's Creation emphases, that we have to, as Catholics, cut through the political polarization and really understand the issue as it stands in and of itself. As Catholics, we also take seriously some of the implications of our actions and recognize that there is a whole chain of consequences that might be impacted or that we might be impacting by what we do, what we buy, how we behave. And this is an important way that we can really have an impact to, again, patronize businesses that ensure ethical employment for their workers, that manufacture goods along lines that do recognize the dignity of the human person, and also are environmentally responsible. That's also a good thing that we want to consider. This does usually imply that it's more expensive. I heard this statistic that about 100 years ago, the average American would budget about 10% of their annual income for their wardrobe. Now we budget about 4%. And we have probably twice as much, if not 4 times as many clothes as people back then used to have. And this sort of contrast is understood by, once upon a time, clothing was much more expensive because it was made typically right in your own state, your own country, by people that you knew, sometimes folks that, grew the cotton, that harvested it, that wove the fabric. You would be able to actually go and see where this stuff was done. Now it's been sort of shipped offshore. And so, with our clothing, for example, yeah, you might have to spend a little bit more money. Perhaps if it's going to be an ethical choice, then this is something that is a reality. And that might be too much for somebody. And I'm not saying that we can't buy anything without having to do all this research, but it is worthwhile looking into it. Sometimes going to thrift stores, finding clothing that it's good enough for second, third, fourth ownership. These are ways that we can kind of limit the market for a lot of cheaply made goods, which are made cheaply monetarily speaking, but again, they're made on the backs by the blood, sweat, and tears of many folks who are in a form of modern slavery. And so as Catholics, this is part of our holistic understanding of our human relationships and our sort of ethical impact in our environment and with our purchases. So that's kind of a ready-made way where we can not only be aware of human trafficking, but actually start to act to limit, even in our own ways, but it's an important way, the demand that is then supplied by these illicit means. And as always, above all, and through it all, please pray. Pray for those men and women, those boys and girls who are in this bondage, who have been brought into this lifestyle. There are many expressions of it. It can be sort of complicated with either drug addiction, sexual abuse, literal physical bondage, intimidation. There are many contributing factors to this that we want to see through it all and recognize the dignity of the human person who is the victim of this very nefarious system that's grown up and is very alive and well in our world. We see all the various contributing factors, not just economically, but for example, Planned Parenthood enables sex trafficking. They enable sex trafficking, and especially by providing abortion for minors without any necessary parental consent. Many of these minors themselves are sex slaves. They are prostitutes who are pimped out and then brought to Planned Parenthood and forced into an abortion, forced to have an abortion so that they can continue this sex work. And as Catholics, we recognize that this is abominable. This is something that has far-reaching impact and in the pro-life cause, in our efforts to establish and fight for justice and authentic human dignity and good conditions in that everybody has a right to. So please pray for those people who are a victim of these things, and pray for the perpetrators, that they would have a conversion of heart, that they might see what they are doing, and God might change their hearts, and they might help those who they are otherwise now preying upon and victimizing. As we are able to look at our own lives and to evaluate, what do I do and how can I perhaps change a few things to live differently so as to make a positive impact? We can also be on the lookout for folks who may be victims of human trafficking. As I said, we live along the I-25 corridor. Good chances in a restaurant, at a gas station, you might be in the same room as somebody who is a victim of human trafficking. And so to become more aware of what the signs are and then what to do in those circumstances. You might be able to save somebody's life. You might be able to save somebody else's daughter, somebody else's son, somebody else's brother or sister. So the more eyes that we have on this, the better. It's very similar to our safe environment training. The more parishioners that are safe environment trained understand the signs or the potential grooming of children for abuse. And so the more people are aware of that and recognize it, the more people can potentially stop it before it ever happens. So it's a big issue, it's a heavy issue, but it is a real issue, and it's something that I hope we all take seriously and consider what we can do to try to impact this and move the needle even just a little bit in the right direction. Another thing you can do is to support our women's ministry effort to develop these support hope bags that are going to be available for victims of human trafficking. And you'll be able to check out the bulletin with a list of items that we would like in these bags, and the women's ministry will be collecting them throughout the month of January, especially the last few weeks, and helping to put these resources at the disposal of those people who are, again, victims of this very, very heinous crime. So please check the bulletin for another great way that you can support this wonderful effort right here at our parish. Of much different gravity, much less gravity, but still annoying, there are people who are continuing to pretend to be me, Father Jim Barron, another priest or a deacon, and get your contact information, emails or texts, and ask you for things like gift cards or secret requests that they have. This is not me. These are not the priests. Please, if you receive one of these things, ignore it. If you want to troll them back, by all means, that's your deal. But I will never ask you for iTunes or Apple gift cards or any gift card for that matter. I will never solicit particular favors that I need you to sort of spend money, send me codes, things of that nature. So please be aware that this is happening again. If you receive a text, an email, a phone call, even from one of these folks, ignore it. If you want to go through, there is a website that you can report fraud. It's a bit more involved, but the best and first thing to do again is ignore it and to share with your friends. They tend to prey on good-hearted people, and that's you. And some of you have gotten phone calls or texts or emails from people pretending to represent me, and fortunately you've reached out to ask, is this really you? No, it's not. Don't worry about it. Thank you, though, for checking. And I don't think anybody has really gone out of their way. I know one person a year or two ago did actually buy gift cards, but they checked with me before they sent the information to this person, and so they were able to return them to the store and get a refund. But yeah, this is nothing I will ever ask you for or to do on my behalf, so just be aware of that. We are looking ahead to a great spring. I know the longer days are something that we're all going to welcome, but I also welcome personally a little bit of cold weather and snow. I hope we get a little bit of moisture, but I do want to say thanks to all of our groundskeeping crew, especially Gary Vitt, who was so diligent about watering all of our very thirsty plants and grass over the fall, so that when springtime comes again and the rains return, we'll actually have living plants and grass to water to beautify our spaces. There are going to be a number of other things coming up in the spring, as per usual, with Lent and some of the sacraments that we're going to be approaching at Easter. But in the meantime, as always, know of my gratitude, my love for you, and thank you for witnessing to Christ as his disciples and really helping to build one another up in prayer and encouragement and in Christian fellowship. God bless you and have a beautiful January.